Welcome back, everyone. Apple's first quarter performance for 2025 is out, and we're diving into their earnings report to see what's really going on.
Yeah, there's always more to the story than just the headlines. Let's unpack what these numbers really mean for Apple's future.
Definitely. And for all of you following along, if you're finding this deep dive insightful, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this a like. It helps others find the channel too.
All right, so let's get into those numbers. Apple actually beat what Wall Street was expecting for profits, coming in at $2.40 earnings per share. They predicted $2.35. Overall revenue also beat the predictions, reaching $124.3 billion. That's up 4% compared to last year. Sounds pretty good on the surface, right?
It does. But as usual, it's important to look beyond those top-line figures. When you break it down by product, some interesting things start to pop up. For example, iPhone sales didn't quite meet expectations. They brought in $69.14 billion, but the prediction was $71.03 billion.
And that's not a small difference. Plus, if you look at Greater China specifically, sales there dropped a pretty significant 11.1%. That's their biggest drop in that region since last year at this time. Makes you wonder what's happening over there.
China's a really important market for Apple, so that decline definitely raises some red flags. Apple says half of that drop is due to adjustments in their channel inventory, which basically means they're tweaking how they manage their stock.
Which means their initial predictions for demand might have been a bit off.
Exactly. But what about the other half of that sales dip? Is it just a general slowdown in the Chinese economy, or is something else going on?
Well, one factor could be that Apple's new AI features, Apple Intelligence, aren't available in China yet because of regulations. And those features are a big selling point for the iPhone 16 in other parts of the world.
That makes a lot of sense. It makes you wonder if they do get those features rolled out in China, like they're planning to do by April, could that be the boost they need to get sales back on track?
It's certainly a possibility, but it's not a guarantee. They'll need to convince the Chinese market of the value of those AI features, especially since people there haven't been able to try them out yet.
True. It's a gamble, but it could pay off big time. Speaking of things that are paying off, let's talk about the one area where Apple really shined this quarter. Their services, subscriptions, warranties, licensing, all of that is doing incredibly well.
For sure. They brought in a record $26.34 billion in revenue from services, up almost 14% compared to last year. And get this, they now have over 1 billion subscriptions across all their different services. That's a huge testament to how they're diversifying their revenue streams.
That's a really smart move.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not just depending on iPhone sales, they're building a whole ecosystem with those recurring subscriptions. And that stability helps balance out any ups and downs in hardware sales.
Absolutely. It shows they're thinking ahead and adapting to how the tech world is changing. They're still all about the iPhone, but they're not putting all their eggs in one basket.
And speaking of not neglecting other products, the Mac and iPad both had a fantastic quarter. Sales for both were up 15%, hitting $8.99 billion for the Mac and $8.09 billion for the iPad. It seems like their recent product launches, especially for the Mac, have really been resonating with people.
It goes to show that Apple is still innovating and staying competitive across their product lines. The new Macs that came out last fall have gotten a lot of positive attention, and it looks like that's translating into sales.
Yeah, those new Macs seem to have really hit the mark in terms of features, performance, and design. It's great to see that reflected in the numbers.
Definitely. And it reminds us that while the iPhone might get the most attention, Apple's still a major player in the computer and tablet world. They need to keep pushing in those areas to stay successful in the long run.
And it's a good reminder that Apple has a pretty diverse range of products, not just iPhones. Speaking of which, the other products category, which includes things like Apple Watch and AirPods, saw a slight dip this quarter. It was down 2% to $11.75 billion.
Yeah, that makes you wonder, is the wearables market starting to get saturated? Or is this just a temporary thing for Apple? We've seen huge growth in wearables over the past few years, so maybe it's just slowing down naturally.
That's a good point. Maybe consumer demand has leveled off, or maybe the competition's getting tougher for Apple. It'll be interesting to see how they handle this moving forward.
Definitely. But it's important to note that even with that small dip, wearables still make up a big chunk of Apple's revenue. They're a key part of that Apple ecosystem, and I'm sure they'll keep innovating there.
Absolutely. Apple's known for their design and user experience, so I'm sure they'll find ways to keep people excited about wearables. Now, zooming out a bit, let's talk about Apple's overall financial health. Even with these challenges we've talked about, their profits are still incredibly strong.
That's for sure. They achieved a record-breaking 46.9% gross margin, the highest they've ever had. And they're predicting it will be somewhere between 46.5% and 47.5% next quarter. Those numbers are really impressive, especially considering all the economic uncertainty out there.
It really shows that they're running a tight ship when it comes to costs, and they can still charge a premium for their products and services. That strong financial position gives them a lot of room to invest in research and development, explore new markets, and weather any storms that might come their way.
And it shows how much people trust the Apple brand. Consumers are willing to pay more for Apple products because they see the value in them. That kind of loyalty is a huge asset.
It is. And they've earned that loyalty over years of putting out quality products, creating a smooth user experience, and building a brand that resonates with people all over the world. Other companies would kill for that kind of brand loyalty.
Totally. Now, to understand where Apple might be headed next, it's worth considering what Tim Cook highlighted. He pointed out that iPhone sales were stronger in the places where Apple Intelligence features are available, even though it's currently limited to English-speaking countries.
Which suggests that those AI features have the potential to really boost iPhone sales globally. As they add more languages, like they plan to do with simplified Chinese by April, we could see a big impact, especially in regions where they've been struggling.
It's definitely a key part of their strategy. By bringing those features to more people, they're making the iPhone even more appealing. The question is, will it be enough to overcome the challenges they're facing, particularly in places like China?
That's the million-dollar question. Investors and analysts are definitely keeping a close eye on that. And speaking of investors, even with the recent ups and downs, most analysts are still optimistic about Apple. The stock is up 28% over the past year, which shows they have faith in Apple's long-term prospects.
It tells me that investors see the value in Apple's diverse product lineup and their long-term strategy. They're not just fixated on those quarterly numbers, they're looking at the bigger picture, and they believe that Apple can continue to innovate and adapt.
It goes to show that Apple's playing the long game. They're investing in new technologies, entering new markets, and building a strong services ecosystem. There might be some bumps in the road, but their overall trajectory looks pretty positive.
And that's what makes Apple so interesting to analyze. They're a complex company with a long history, and they're always trying to push the boundaries. To really understand what they're doing, you have to dig deeper and look at all the different pieces.
Exactly. We have to consider their product pipeline, their global strategy, their financial strength, and how they're adapting to the rapidly changing tech landscape. It's a multifaceted analysis, and that's what makes it so compelling.
Couldn't agree more. Now, circling back to something we touched on earlier, the success of the Mac and iPad this quarter raises an intriguing question. Is it possible that Apple's starting to shift its focus away from the iPhone?
It's a thought-provoking question. For so long, the iPhone has been their flagship product, the one everyone associates with Apple. But are we seeing a subtle change in priorities?
It's definitely possible. Their investments in other product lines, especially the Mac and iPad, are really paying off. These devices aren't just side projects anymore. They're becoming major sources of revenue.
And you can't forget about the continued growth of their services, which is becoming a major driver of their profits. This diversification strategy means they're less reliant on any one product, and it makes them more appealing to consumers.
Exactly. Apple's building this whole ecosystem of products and services that all work together seamlessly. It's a smart move that positions them to be more than just the iPhone company.
It feels like they're aiming to be the one-stop shop for all your tech needs, from computers and tablets to wearables, entertainment, health, and everything in between. It's a pretty ambitious vision.
It is, and it could have a big impact on the future of the tech industry as a whole. Apple's moves tend to set trends and influence what other companies do.
It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out in the next few years. How will they continue to innovate? What new products and services will they introduce? How will they navigate all the changes in what consumers want and what's possible with technology?
Those are the questions that keep us on the edge of our seats. Analyzing Apple is like watching a master chess player. They're always thinking several moves ahead.
It's a game of strategy, innovation, and anticipating what's coming next. And Apple's always been pretty good at that game, even when they face challenges.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought. We've talked about Apple diversifying, expanding into new markets, and their strong financial position. But one thing we haven't really touched on is sustainability and how that fits into their future strategy.
That's a really important point, and it's something that consumers are increasingly concerned about, especially younger generations. There's a lot of pressure on companies, especially big tech companies like Apple, to reduce their environmental impact and operate ethically.
For sure. So the question is, how will Apple respond to this growing demand for sustainable products and practices? Will they make eco-friendly manufacturing a priority? Will they invest more in renewable energy? Will they design products that last longer longer and are easier to repair?
These are really important questions that could have a big impact on their brand and their bottom line. Consumers becoming more and more conscious of these things, and they want to support companies that share their values.
Absolutely. It's not just about following the rules anymore. It's about gaining a competitive edge. Companies that prioritize sustainability are more likely to attract and keep talented employees, build stronger brand loyalty, and even drive innovation.
And Apple, with all their resources and global reach, has a real opportunity to be a leader in this area. They could set a new standard for the entire industry, encouraging other companies to follow their lead.
They really could. It's a chance for them to not only improve their business, but also make a positive impact on the world. It's a win-win. Good for their shareholders, their employees, and the planet.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, that's what we all want, right?
Yeah.
A more sustainable and equitable future driven by technology that benefits both humanity and the environment.
That's definitely a vision worth working towards, and it's something we'll keep exploring as we analyze the companies and trends shaping the tech world.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Apple's first quarter performance. It's been a fascinating look at their financial results, product launches, and the strategic decisions they're making.
We've covered a lot of ground: iPhone sales in China, the growth of their services, the potential of Apple Intelligence, and the increasing importance of sustainability.
And if you've enjoyed this deep dive and you want to stay up to date on the latest in tech and business, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give us a like.
We'll be back with more in-depth analysis and discussions that challenge the way you think about the tech world. Until then, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep pushing for a better future. Thanks for joining us.